Good afternoon, American literature. I am back. It is time for us to read our next text when we talk about romanticism. Washington Irving spent The Devil and Tom Walker talking about greed, a little bit of ego. Nathaniel Hawthorne talks about something else in humanity, just as dark as the greed that we have. He talks about how we interact or don't interact with each other. So today I'm going to read The Minister's Black Veil, written in 1836. Now, the original story is about 5,000 words long. I cut it in half, so you're reading an abridged version. If you do want to read the whole text, it's probably anywhere you do a search online for the text. You'll be able to get the whole thing. But I did an abridged version because not everybody's going to share my enthusiasm for this story. But this is one of my favorites, definitely in American literature, okay? So I'm going to read it and provide analysis, and there's going to be a multiple choice question test afterwards that you have to turn in on 365. All right. Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Minister's Black Veil, a parable. Before I even begin reading this, a parable is a story that's sole purpose is to teach a lesson. This is no more realistic than The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving. You know, a man taking a shortcut in the forest, he encounters the devil who gives him buried treasure, and then the devil comes and gets him when he's old. That's not believable, but it's there to teach you about human greed. This one is here to teach you something else. Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Minister's Black Veil, a parable. First question on your exit ticket. What does it mean that this story is a parable? And I just answered it, okay? The sexton stood in the porch of Milford Meeting House, pulling busily at the bell rope. The old people of the village came stooping along the street. Children with bright faces tripped merrily beside their parents, or mimicked a graver gait in the conscious dignity of their Sunday clothes. Spruce bachelors looked sidelong at the pretty maidens and fancied that the Sabbath sunshine made them prettier than on weekdays. When the throng had mostly streamed into the porch, the sexton began to toll the bell, keeping his eye on the Reverend Mr. Hooper's door. The first glimpse of the clergyman's figure was the signal for the bell to cease its summons. "But what has good Parson Hooper got upon his face?" cried the sexton in astonishment. All within hearing immediately turned about and beheld the semblance of Mr. Hooper, pacing slowly his meditative way toward the meeting house. With one accord they started, expressing more wonder than if some strange minister were coming to dust the cushions of Mr. Hooper's pulpit. "Are you sure it is our parson?" inquired Goodman Gray of the sexton. "Of a certainty, it is good Mr. Hooper," replied the sexton. "He was to have exchanged pulpits with Parson Shute of Westbury, but Parson Shute sent to excuse himself yesterday, being to preach a funeral sermon. The cause of so much amazement may appear sufficiently slight. Mr. Hooper, a gentlemanly person of about 30, though still a bachelor, was dressed with due clerical neatness, as if a careful wife had starched his band and brushed the weekly dust from his Sunday's garb. There was but one thing remarkable in his appearance. Swathed about his forehead and hanging down over his face, so low as to be shaken by his breath, Mr. Hooper had on a black veil. On a nearer view, it seemed to consist of 2 folds of crape, which entirely concealed his features, except the mouth and chin, but probably did not intercept his sight further than to give a darkened aspect to all living and inanimate things. With this gloomy shade before him, good Mr. Hooper walked onward at a slow and quiet pace, stooping somewhat and looking on the ground as is customary with abstracted men, yet nodding kindly to those of his parishioners who still waited on the meeting-house steps, but so wonderstruck were they that his greeting hardly met with a return. "I can't really feel as if good Mr. Hooper's face was behind that piece of crape," said the sexton. "I don't like it," muttered an old woman as she hobbied into the meeting house. "He has changed himself into something awful only by hiding his face." "Our parson has gone mad," cried Goodman Gray, following him across the threshold. All right. There's a lot to unpack out of that first section of text. Now, you need to understand, and this is question number 2 on your exit ticket, it asks you about the setting of the story. This is taking place in the late 1600s, early 1700s in a Puritan village. A sexton is somebody who keeps up the maintenance of a church. So the guy, his job is to ring the bell and let everybody know it's Sunday, it's time for church. And he stops ringing the bell as soon as he sees the preacher. Well, when he sees the preacher, he realizes that the preacher has a black veil on his face. It's covering just about here, and actually I have a picture of it in the text. I should have showed you guys this beforehand. But the black veil is covering below his eyes, and do I have a picture of it? I should. Sorry guys, I should be more prepared. There it is. Okay, I have a picture of it. So the black veil is covering most of his face, but enough for him to breathe. Okay? Now, what you have to understand is that this man is a reverend, and he's their preacher. But look at what the lady says. "I don't like it. He has changed himself into something awful only by hiding his face." And then the next one says, "Our parson has gone mad." A guy has said that. He's gone crazy. One of the themes of this story is how judgmental human beings are. This is the same pastor. If you notice, there is a ritual, a structure, a schedule. Okay? There's a schedule. They follow it every Sunday. The bell rings. As soon as the pastor comes out, the bell stops ringing. Everybody goes to church. And yet, this Sunday, the only thing that's different is he has a veil on. And now people are like, he's changed himself into something awful over a piece of fabric. It's the same guy that was preaching last Sunday. He's gone crazy over a piece of fabric. Is he not the same person that has been preaching for you guys? You're letting a piece of fabric change what you think he is. Human beings are judgmental. You know, if we were in class, which I wish we were, I could go on and on about this for hours, so I'm about to stop and restart reading. But think about your significant other. If they shaved their head one day, or if they colored their hair, I don't have any, but if they colored red and green and orange and yellow and purple, you know, stripes in their head, would you still be with them? They're the same person they were yesterday. Their appearance has changed. So human beings judge based on appearance. And that is one of the things that this story is about, judgment, okay? All right, I'm going to keep reading. Mr. Hooper had the reputation of a good preacher, but not an energetic one. He strove to win his people heavenward by mild, persuasive influences, rather than to drive them thither by the thunders of the word. The sermon which he now delivered was marked by the same characteristics of style and manner as the general series of his pulpit oratory, but there was something either in the sentiment of the discourse itself or in the imagination of the auditors which made it greatly the most powerful effort that they had ever heard from their pastor's lips. It was tinged rather more darkly than usual with the gentle gloom of Mr. Hooper's temperament. The subject had reference to secret sin and those sad mysteries which we hide from our nearest and dearest, and would fain conceal from our own consciousness, even forgetting that the omniscient can detect them. A subtle power was breathed into his words. Each member of his congregation, the most innocent girl and the man of hardened breast, felt as if the preacher had crept upon them behind his awful veil and discovered their hoarded iniquity of deed or thought. Many spread their clasped hands on their bosoms. There was nothing terrible in what Mr. Hooper said, at least no violence, and yet with every tremor of his melancholy voice, the hearers quaked. An unsought pathos came hand in hand with awe. So sensible were the audience of some unwanted attribute in their minister that they longed for a breath of wind to blow aside the veil, almost believing that a stranger's visage would be discovered, though the form, gesture, and voice were those of Mr. Hooper. I want to talk about the second theme. There's 4 themes in this story. The first one is judgment. Humans are judgmental. The second thing is secrecy. Not only does he have the black veil on, but nobody knows why, and that bothers them. But here's the other thing. What you have to understand is that for your pastor here, your main character, he is doing a sermon about the fact that we have secrets, all of us have secrets, and we keep things secret and live our lives as if they don't exist, not thinking about them, even though we know God knows everything. That is what his sermon is about. And I want to take this further. What secrets are we hiding from others? Because think of it like this, and I don't have a black veil. If I was, I wish we were at school. I want you to think of it like this. What you see here is what I choose to show. Whatever about my life or about me as a person or whatever has happened to me or I plan on doing is what I choose to tell you. But there are things that every single person hides about themselves or what they've done. Everybody has a secret. Everybody. Okay? And so we are all inside of this veil. Like there's a wall here. That's what the veil is, a symbol. That's on your exit ticket as well. The veil is a symbol. There's a wall. And so if you imagine on this side of the wall, it's everything that you know, that you've been through, secrets that you have, things that you've done that you would never tell anybody. So what are you hiding? All right, so that's kind of like the other theme here, that we all have secrets. And really, when you look at people, whenever I go to the market or anything, I'm always wondering about the person in front of me or the person behind me. What have they done? How do I know? The person in front of me could be a murderer. I wouldn't know. The person behind me could be a child molester. I wouldn't know. The cashier could be an arsonist. I wouldn't know. But we all have secrets. And the thing is, and this is what makes it so dangerous. You think you know somebody, but you don't. All you know is what they reveal. And that is a scary thought. What you know about your parents, your siblings, your significant other, what you know about them is what they reveal. So what are they hiding? I challenge you, go out there and ask them, what secrets are you keeping from me? Because everybody has secrets. Okay? This is a human story. All right? All right, let me keep going because I could preach on this for a while. I have students hitting me up. That's what that noise is. All right. All right. How strange, said a lady, that a simple black veil, such as any woman might wear on her bonnet, should become such a terrible thing on Mr. Hooper's face. Something must surely be amiss with Mr. Hooper's intellects, observed her husband, a physician of the village. But the strangest part of the affair is the effect of this vagary, even on a sober-minded man like myself. The black veil, though it covers only our pastor's face, throws its influence over his whole person and makes him ghost-like from head to foot. Do you not feel it so? Truly do I, replied the lady, and I would not be alone with him for the world. I wonder he is not afraid to be alone with himself. Men sometimes are so. When we had the old building, I used to have this large closet in the back that held novels. Lots of novels on the shelves, and it was just this floor space. And what I used to do at this point in the text is I would make somebody go back there, and I would close the door, turn the light out. It was very dark. They couldn't have their phone, and I would have them sit there for 10 minutes. And the thing is that after 10 minutes, I would ask them, was it a scary experience? Listen, guys, we have so much. It's different now because we have technology, but we have so much to distract us. But let me point this out. If you sit in your bedroom late at night, turn off your phone, turn off your television, get rid of the laptops, everything quiet and dark. If you sit there by yourself, you will start to have crazy thoughts. A whole bunch of what ifs, a whole bunch of paranoia, whole lot of paranoia will set in your brain. And that's actually normal. You know, the human brain always works. So when we talk about judgment, these people are like, ugh, I don't want to be alone with him. Like, he got this mask on. I can't take him seriously. Ugh. But this is your pastor. And again, nothing has changed but this little piece of fabric. And when we talk about secrecy, why did he put it on? But what has he done that makes him want to darken his whole world? Think about it like this. The world is now darker when he looks out, but he looks darker because he has this black cloth on his face. What has he done? Because if his secret was revealed, you would have a darker opinion of him. I'm telling you, this story is on it, okay? Another thing this is about is isolation. We are all isolated. Listen, you could be standing right across from somebody and still be alone. How? Because we are all inside of our heads. And that's what that whole idea of sitting in your bedroom late at night with no distractions was about. When you are just inside of your head, you're isolated. You are the only person that knows your thoughts. No one else knows your thoughts. You are the only person in here. Now, you can reveal what you want to reveal, but this right here is your world. Your whole world is in here. So you are isolated, okay? You're thinking something right now while you're watching this. I'm thinking something right now while I'm talking about this or analyzing this. So ultimately, we are isolated from each other because we can't get inside each other's heads. We're isolated because we live our whole worlds up in here. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Isolation is part of this. There's a wall that separates us, and that wall is that nobody can know what I'm thinking. No one can know what I've done. No one can know what I'm planning unless I reveal it. No one knows how I feel unless I reveal it. But if I choose not to reveal it, it all stays up in here. And I don't know what you've done. I don't know what secrets you have. And I don't know what you're planning to do. And I don't know what you think unless you tell me. So I'm isolated inside of my head. You're isolated inside of your head. So isolation is another point, another theme of this story. Judgment, secrecy, isolation. All right, I'm going to keep reading. But there was one person in the village unappalled by the awe with which the black veil had impressed all beside herself. When the deputies returned without an explanation or even venturing to demand one, she, with the calm energy of her character, determined to chase away the strange cloud that appeared to be settling round Mr. Hooper every moment more darkly than before. As his plighted wife, it should be her privilege to know what the black veil concealed. At the minister's first visit, therefore, she entered upon the subject with a direct simplicity, which made the task easier both for him and her. After he had seated himself, she fixed her eyes steadfastly upon the veil, but could discern nothing of the dreadful gloom that had so overawed the multitude. It was but a double fold of crape, hanging down from his forehead to his mouth and slightly stirring with his breath. "No," said she aloud and smiling, "there is nothing terrible in this piece of crape, except that it hides a face which I am always glad to look upon. Come, good sir, let the sun shine from behind the cloud. First, lay aside your black veil, then tell me why you put it on." Mr. Hooper's smile glimmered faintly. "There is an hour to come," said he, "when all of us shall cast aside our veils. Take it not amiss, beloved friend, if I wear this piece of crape till then." "Your words are a mystery too," returned the young lady. "Take away the veil from them at least." "Elizabeth, I will," said he, "so far as my vow may suffer me. Know then that this veil is a type and a symbol, and I am bound to wear it ever, both in light and darkness, in solitude and before the gaze of multitudes. And as with strangers, so with my familiar friends, no mortal eye will see it withdrawn. This dismal shade must separate me from the world. Even you, Elizabeth, can never come behind it." "What grievous affliction hath befallen you," she earnestly inquired, "that you should thus darken your eyes forever?" "If it be a sign of mourning," replied Mr. Hooper, "I, perhaps, like most other mortals, have sorrows dark enough to be typified by a black veil." "But what if the world will not believe that it is the type of innocent sorrow?" urged Elizabeth. "Beloved and respected as you are, there may be whispers that you hide your face under the consciousness of secret sin. For the sake of your holy office, do away this scandal." The color rose into her cheeks as she intimated the nature of the rumors that were already abroad in the village. But Mr. Hooper's mildness did not forsake him. He even smiled again, that same sad smile, which always appeared like a faint glimmering of light, proceeding from the obscurity beneath the veil. "If I hide my face for sorrow, then there is cause enough," he merely replied. "And if I cover it for secret sin, what mortal might not do the same?" And with this gentle but unconquerable obstinacy did he resist all her entreaties. At length Elizabeth sat silent. For a few moments she appeared lost in thought, considering probably what new methods might be tried to withdraw her lover from so dark a fantasy, which, if it had no other meaning, was perhaps a symptom of mental disease, though of a firmer character than his own. The tears rolled down her cheeks, but in an instant, as it were, a new feeling took the place of sorrow. Her eyes were fixed insensibly on the black veil, when like a sudden twilight in the air, its terrors fell around her. She arose and stood trembling before him. "And do you feel it then at last?" said he mournfully. She made no reply, but covered her eyes with her hand and turned to leave the room. He rushed forward and caught her arm. "Have patience with me, Elizabeth," cried he passionately. "Do not desert me. Though this veil must be between us here on earth, be mine, and hereafter there shall be no veil over my face, no darkness between our souls. It is but a mortal veil. It is not for eternity. Oh, you know not how lonely I am and how frightened to be alone behind my black veil. Do not leave me in this miserable obscurity forever. Lift the veil but once and look me in the face," said she. "Never, it cannot be," replied Mr. Hooper. "Then farewell," said Elizabeth. All right, hold on. Sorry, needed a little bit of Coke Zero there. My mouth is getting dry. So, he has a fiance. That's what plighted wife means in the text. He has a fiance, Elizabeth. And because this is a story that takes place with a Protestant minister, he's allowed to get married. Here's the issue. She's telling him Get rid of this veil, because people are making up rumors that you've done something awful, and that is why you are hiding your face. And he's like, I don't care about the rumors. And honestly, if we're talking about someone who's done something awful, everyone's done something awful. Everyone. Keep that in mind. Okay, secrets. What are people hiding? We don't know. Then on top of that, she says, well, what sadness do you have? That makes you see the world so darkly. Think about if you're behind this black veil. The whole world is darker. But don't most people have a negative view of the world? And aren't most people in mourning? Aren't most people depressed or sad? Maybe not all the time, but we all know what sadness is like. According to your author and the narrator, in this case, the narrator is probably third person omniscient, or third person limited rather. But the thing is that Mr. Hooper knows this as well. There's lots about life that makes us sad. Okay? As corny as this is going to sound, I can't resist. I'm sad that I'm not with y'all right now. So the world looks darker to me. Anyway, I know. Corny, mushy, I get it. But the point is that he's like, everybody is mourning some sort of loss, so that's why I can wear this veil. Finally, and this is the part I want you to get into, because your author's making a point here. He's like, look, don't leave me. Even though this veil must be between us on earth, it'll be lifted when we die and go to heaven. You will know everything about me at that point. And he says, I'm lonely. Don't leave me. And she says, then take off the veil. And he says, never. And she says, peace out. Your author's making a couple points with this. Number one, does unconditional love exist between humans? Is there anything that you can do to make someone not love you? Is that why you keep it a secret behind the veil? Because you don't want people to not love you. Even more so, let's talk about romantic love. Does romantic unconditional love exist? Now, if she loves him enough to say yes to his marriage proposal, then why is this piece of cloth that doesn't mean anything? Why is this piece of cloth that is so insignificant, it's the only thing that's different about him, cause her to run off and leave him by herself? Did she ever really love him? I've always used Elizabeth as a negative in this story, but then I had Miss Fullerlove told me a couple years ago that I was being sexist because I'm saying that the man is right, but clearly if he cared about her enough, he'd remove the veil. Let's look at this deeper. Even though you are married to someone and y'all sleep in the same bed at night, you don't know what's in their head. They could be plotting to kill you. They could be plotting to kill you and you would never know because they didn't reveal it. And y'all are married and sleeping in the same bed and living in the same house. So the thing is that can that love between two people be unconditional if the two people live inside of their heads and they don't really know each other as well as they think? There's a lot of things that are brought up here by your author. Again, I could talk about this for years, but I'm going to keep going. I love this story. This is probably my favorite. All right. So she leaves him, and he's going to live the rest of his life alone. In this manner, Mr. Hooper spent a long life, irreproachable in outward act, yet shrouded in dismal suspicions, kind and loving, though unloved, and dimly feared, a man apart from men, shunned in their health and joy, but ever summoned to their aid in mortal anguish. As years wore on, shedding their snows above his sable veil, he acquired a name throughout the New England churches, and they called him Father Hooper. Nearly all his parishioners, who were of mature age when he was settled, had been borne away by many a funeral. He had one congregation in the church and a more crowded one in the churchyard. And having wrought so late into the evening and done his work so well, it was now good Father Hooper's turn to rest. Several persons were visible by the shaded candlelight in the death chamber of the old clergyman. Natural connections? He had none, but there was the decorously grave, though unmoved physician, seeking only to mitigate the last pangs of the patient whom he could not save. There were the deacons and other eminently pious members of his church. There also was the Reverend Mr. Clark of Westbury, a young and zealous divine who had ridden in haste to pray by the bedside of the expiring minister. There was the nurse, no hired handmaiden of death, but one whose calm affection had endured thus long in secrecy and solitude amid the chill of age and would not perish even at the dying hour. Who but Elizabeth? And there lay the hoary head of good Father Hooper upon the death pillow, with the black veil still swathed about his brow and reaching down over his face, so that each more difficult gasp of his faint breath caused it to stir. All through life that piece of crape had hung between him and the world. It had separated him from cheerful brotherhood and woman's love, and kept him in the saddest of all prisons, his own heart. And still it lay upon his face, as if to deepen the gloom of his darksome chamber and shade him from the sunshine of eternity. All right. So Father Hooper's about to die. One of the exit ticket questions that you have is about Elizabeth and her being there at the end. Remember, he was about 30 when he put the black veil on. And she told him, look, if you don't remove this, I can't be with you. Which to me is shallow, conditional love. It's not unconditional. But nonetheless, she is there at his death. Now, anybody could say, well, she loved him. He just was being stubborn. So she couldn't be with him, but she's going to be there for him in this time of need. I, on the other hand, knowing Nathaniel Hawthorne, knowing, because he wrote this story in 1836 when I was about, 12. Knowing Nathaniel Hawthorne, I know it's darker than that. She probably feels guilty. This man lived alone, had no children of his own, had nothing but his preaching job. People didn't invite him to dinner or anything. Some of the parts that I left out was he did a wedding, he did a funeral, and people were afraid of him because of the veil. So he lived his whole life alone. Even the text just said in the prison of his own heart. And she could have been with him, but she was being shallow. So I think she's there out of guilt, and that's the answer on your exit ticket. She might love him, but she feels guilty that she left a good man alone because in the text it says he was a good man. Okay? Let's keep reading. The minister of Westbury approached the bedside. "Venerable Father Hooper," said he, "the moment of your release is at hand. Are you ready for the lifting of the veil that shuts in time from eternity?" Father Hooper at first replied merely by a feeble motion of his head, then apprehensive perhaps that his meaning might be doubtful, he exerted himself to speak. "Yea," said he in faint accents, "my soul hath a patient weariness until the veil be lifted." "And it is fitting," resumed the Reverend Mr. Clark, "that a man so given to prayer, of such a blameless example, holy in deed and thought, so far as mortal judgment may pronounce, is it fitting that a father in the church should leave a shadow on his memory that may seem to blacken a life so pure? I pray you, my venerable brother, let not this thing be. Suffer us to be gladdened by your triumphant aspect as you go to your reward. Before the veil of eternity be lifted, let me cast aside this black veil from your face." And thus speaking, the Reverend Mr. Clark bent forward to reveal the mystery of so many years, but exerting a sudden energy that made all the beholders stand aghast, Father Hooper snatched both his hands from beneath the bedclothes and pressed them strongly on the black veil, resolute to struggle if the minister of Westbury would contend with the dying man. "Never," cried the veiled clergyman, "on earth never." "Dark old man," exclaimed the frightened minister, "with what horrible crime upon your soul are you now passing to the judgment?" Father Hooper's breath heaved. It rattled in his throat. But with a mighty effort, grasping forward with his hands, he caught hold of life and held it back till he should speak. He even raised himself in bed, and there he sat, shivering with the arms of death around him, while the black veil hung down, awful at that last moment in the gathered terrors of a lifetime. And yet the faint, sad smile so often there now seemed to glimmer from its obscurity and linger on Father Hooper's lips. "Why do you tremble at me alone?" cried he, turning his veiled face round the circle of pale spectators. "Tremble also at each other. Have men avoided me, and women shown no pity, and children screamed and fled only for my black veil? What but the mystery which it obscurely typifies has made this piece of crape so awful? When the friend shows his inmost heart to his friend, the lover to his best beloved, when man does not vainly shrink from the eyes of his creator, loathsomely treasuring up the secret of his sin, then deem me a monster. For the symbol beneath which I have lived and die, I look around me, and lo, on every visage a black veil." Before I read the last paragraph, it's so important to understand what he says before he dies. He says, "My whole life, y'all have left me alone because y'all know I have a secret." The crazy thing about this is so do you. The last theme of this story is hypocrisy. We are hypocrites. Human beings are hypocrites. It's okay for you to do something. For me to do something. Go back. It's okay for me to do something, but it's not okay for you to do it. Human beings are hypocrites. Think of all the adults in your life to tell you not to curse, and they curse. Again, human beings are hypocrites. So he has a secret. But guess what? So do you. I have a secret. But guess what? So do you. And you don't like me because I have a secret and won't tell you what it is. But guess what? You have a secret and you won't tell me what it is. This is human nature, but it's human nature to be hypocritical. So the last theme here is hypocrisy. People have left him alone because he's made it known that he has a secret. But guess what? They all have secrets. So it scares them that they must face their own secrecy by him revealing the fact that he has a secret and everybody, according to him, has on a black veil. And when you see on this side of the black veil, outwardly, you may forget that you're wearing it and you may see it on everybody else. I'm telling you, this story is amazing. So we are hypocritical. This is why I never liked cancel culture. If you just let me talk for 5 more seconds. I never liked cancel culture because my whole thing is, yes, celebrities say bad things. Celebrities post bad things. Celebrities make bad memes and bad choices. But we all do that. How many things have you said to your best friend or to a family member that if everybody in the world knew you said it, they would judge you, they would preach at you, they would condemn you, they would hate you? You know what I'm saying? So why do we do it to other people? If a celebrity says something that's terrible or racist or sexist, I'm not saying that it's okay. But what I'm saying is most human beings have said things that are terrible, racist, or sexist. So should we be canceling them out? Who cancels you out when you say something terrible? You know? Or here's the better thing. Why don't we have more forgiveness? Okay, they said something terrible. Let's yell at them and not buy their albums y'all don't buy albums. But let's take away their money and their way of making a living. Fine. But when do we accept their apology? You know? And the thing is that if we made a mistake, we would want someone to accept our apology. We would want people to take it easy on us and have mercy on us, but we don't give that to each other. So again, this hypocrisy, human beings are hypocritical. We really are. And so I'm going to read the last paragraph, and then I'll talk to you what I think Nathaniel Hawthorne meant. Last paragraph. While his auditors shrank from one another in mutual affright, Father Hooper fell back against his pillow. A veiled corpse, with a faint smile lingering on his lips. Still veiled, they laid him in the coffin, and a veiled corpse, they bore him to the grave. The grass of many years has sprung up and withered on that grave. The burial stone is moss-grown, and good Mr. Hooper's face is dust, but awful is still the thought that it moldered beneath the veil. One of the things is that, and this is on your exit ticket, and I can't believe I forgot this. He's just as afraid of their reaction to the black veil as they are afraid of him. Think of it like this. If I had on a black veil, okay? If I had on a black veil and y'all treated me differently, I would be just as afraid because I think I know y'all, and I would never think y'all would do me like this over a little piece of cloth. And yet, y'all do. So I'm afraid of you because I really don't know you based on the way you're ill-treating me over something that is so insignificant. And you're afraid of me because you know that I have a secret. So that's the paradox in the story. It's like irony a little bit, okay? And the last thing I'm going to say here is Nathaniel Hawthorne, if you ever read any of his text, he has a pretty dark opinion of humanity. And most of the romantics do. Washington Irving said we were greedy. And Nathaniel Hawthorne is saying we are judgmental, isolated, secretive, and hypocritical. So they have these dark ideas about humanity. They're not talking about the best of humanity. They're talking about the worst. And these things really do, those noises are the ninth grade teachers sending reminds to each other. Anyway, those dark qualities we all have, okay? And after spring break, so after you guys do this is the assignment for Thursday the 26th and Friday the 27th. I'm going to give you guys a week off. I'm not going to post any assignments next week. If you're failing my class, though, you need to get in touch with me, and you need to decide, you need to do makeup work, okay? So you need to get in touch with me through Remind. But I'm going to leave you with this. So Nathaniel Hawthorne has a dark idea of humanity. Edgar Allan Poe is who we read next, okay? And that's what we're going to read on the other side of the break, okay? But nonetheless, we are looking at romantics who talk about human emotions, but they definitely, the ones that I chose, talk about the darker side of humanity. But notice that, again, the Minister's Black Veil is not realistic. It exists only to teach a lesson. And it's not realistic in that a preacher would wear a black veil from the time he was 30 until he died, okay? All right, if you have any questions, please feel free to hit me on Remind. And I will see you on Monday. What is that Monday after spring break? I think it's the 6th, Monday, April 6th. Yeah, because I think the 3rd is Friday, 4th, 5th, 6th. So Monday, April 6th, I will start with Edgar Allan Poe. Thank you guys for paying attention. I know this was long, but it's a great story.